This took place 2 summers ago in the hometown of the Cowboys. I'm aware of human trafficking in this city. I had a coworker who was pulled out of work and put in a safe house by the FBI because she finally decided to rat on her family. However, I never thought they randomly snatched people. In all the stories I'd heard, they used drugs or coercion. So 2 summers ago, I was cycling to a smoke shop. It was kind of out of my way in a not-so-great neighborhood, but I felt fairly confident. It was daylight and I rode all over the city. I was 24, short, and had short pink hair, but I always considered myself too intimidating to kidnap. I forgot that, even as a veteran, I'm also a short white girl. I pulled up to a crosswalk and was waiting for the light when 2 Hispanic guys started catcalling me from a windowless white van. No identification, no stickers. Even the way they yelled at me was weird. It wasn't the typical nice tits or let me fuck you locker room nonsense. They would talk to each other and then yell through a cracked window saying things like, "We are gonna get you," and "You're next." It felt off, like they were excited. I just flipped them off and rode away. End of the story, right? Over a mile later, I was right around the block from my destination. To set the scene, there was a massive empty lot, really more like 2 lots, on my right, which was the side I was riding down. On my left, there was the back fence of a very old, probably abandoned house. The area was mostly filled with drifters or elderly people living in poverty, along with a few trap houses. The point is, no one else was visible, and even if anyone had seen what was happening, they probably wouldn't have said anything for their own safety. As I pedaled along, the album I was listening to ended and I thought, I'm almost there. I'm not going to stop and fumble with my phone. That decision saved my life. As I was thinking this, a white van pulled up on my left and stayed just within my peripheral vision. They revved the engine a few times, trying to spook me, but something told me not to react. I decided not to let them know that I knew, so I acted like my music was still playing and pedaled a little faster. Up ahead, there was a brick wall to my left, a tall tree above it, and a quick alley entrance. Suddenly, they punched the gas and pulled up in front of me, stopping next to the brick wall. They were trying to corner or funnel me, putting me in a position where I would have to ride between their door and the wall. This all happened in a span of maybe 7 seconds. Oddly enough, I didn't feel panic. I didn't register any fear, sweat, or anxiety. It was as if someone much calmer took over my body and just said, "Nope." Without consciously thinking about it, I crossed the street. As I pedaled past the other side of the van, I realized it was the same one from earlier. Now it had a window repair magnet on the side. The magnet was too small to look legitimate and had no contact info, just a generic name. I kept rubbernecking and noticed no one was in the front, but there was movement behind the seats. The guys were in the back by the door, clearly planning to drag me off my bike and into the van. Once I got past them, they scrambled into the front seat and sped off, burning rubber as they left. I made it to the store safely, but I still hate myself for not taking down the plate number. Not that it would have helped much. They probably switched it out later. I knew I had almost been kidnapped and killed, or worse. But it wasn't until I told the story to someone from Mexico that I learned they were probably traffickers. My friend said it sounded familiar and happens all the time. I have no family and my roommates are just roommates. I would have been gone for 3 to 7 days before anyone realized something was wrong. Even then, they would have only known that I left on my bike and disappeared. I would have been across the border or dead before anyone even knew I was missing. I was a dancer for 6 years and I worked in many cities and clubs. At the time of this story, I wasn't a rookie. I was well versed in the industry. I was about 20 or 21 years old, and this took place in Texas at one of the upscale clubs. I never imagined something like this would happen in a place like that, but apparently, I was wrong. I started my shift around 6 p.m. I liked to get there early to meet with some of my regulars before the crowds came in. It was about 8:30 or 9 when a really good-looking guy came in with some friends. They were all older, like 45 years old. I grabbed a few of my hustle friends, and we sat with them. It wasn't hard to convince these guys to head to a VIP room with bottle service, but that's when things started to get weird. The guy I was talking to wanted a separate room just for the 2 of us. I thought maybe it was because his friends seemed rowdy and eager to party hard, and he wanted a more relaxed area. I wasn't complaining. This meant I wouldn't have to share my cut of the room, so, like an idiot, I saw dollar signs and went with it. We ordered 2 bottles of Dom Perignon, along with some mixed drinks and shots. Now, a lot of the guys who come into strip clubs really want to let loose, and they often bring drugs with them. These guys had just about everything, except crack, meth, and heroin. I was definitely a party girl at the time, so yes, I partook in some of it, but I also wasn't stupid. At this point, we were all hanging out in one room together. I took a little hit of coke off the back of my hand and kept drinking. Once everyone was hyped up and ready to party, the guy I was with pulled me into the other room. This guy was about 6'4", obviously worked out a lot, and was attractive. I, on the other hand, was 5'6" without my heels, and weighed around 120 pounds. I sat down in his lap, started talking to him, and worked on getting him to spend more money. We were having a really good conversation, and the bouncers were great about checking on the girls in the rooms, especially since they were pretty secluded on the second floor. After about 20 minutes of talking, something snapped. All of a sudden, he put his hand around my neck, lifted me up and slammed me against the back of the couch. The couch backs were tall and padded, so it wouldn't have been heard on the other side, especially with all the music. I was frozen in fear. After almost 3 years of dancing, I had never been in a situation like this. He started calling me names, spat in my face, and tightened his grip on my neck whenever he felt me take a deep breath, as if I was going to scream. Thankfully, there were other VIP rooms across the large overlook, and a bouncer noticed me kicking and flailing. I faintly remember all the bouncers running into the room. They had to pry me out of his hands. Once I was finally back sitting on the couch, they had him pinned to the floor outside the room, and his friends acted like they didn't even know him. My manager grabbed me, carried me like a baby to the dressing room, and asked if I needed any medical attention. I said no. I was just really shaken up. His friends ended up talking to my manager and basically gave me guilt money for what happened. Apparently, he was going through a nasty divorce and decided to take it out on me instead of his ex. This happened in July of 1996. I had just finished my term of service in the Army. I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, and decided that at midnight, I would out-process and travel back to Wisconsin. All day, I was so anxious to leave that I had trouble sleeping. Finally, at 11:45 p.m., I got out of bed and went to sign out with the desk sergeant. Of course, knowing that people would want to sign out at midnight, he decided to do his rounds. You can't leave until you get your final sign-off from the sergeant and turn in your room key. So I waited, and finally, at 2:45 a.m., he returned. I turned in my key, got the sign-off, and by 3:30 a.m., I was on my way. At first, I was so full of adrenaline that I felt like I could drive for days. Unfortunately, that feeling didn't last long, and by the time I was passing through Dallas, I was nodding off. Just past Denton, I decided to pull over at the next rest stop and take a quick nap until the sun came up. I could barely keep my eyes open when I pulled into a stop. I got out of my car to get some air, throw something away, and take a look at my surroundings. There were only about 3 other cars and 2 semi-trucks there. It was a picnic stop, not a rest stop, so there were no restrooms. I threw my trash away and glanced at a poster of missing persons, but I didn't really pay much attention to it. I went back to my car, which was a basic Geo Metro. No radio, no power windows, no power locks. I cracked the windows, turned on the boombox I had for music, and laid down to get some sleep. I had only been asleep for maybe 5 or 10 minutes when I felt my car shake slightly. I cracked an eye open and didn't see anything, so I shrugged it off and went back to sleep. Then I heard what sounded like my door handle being pulled and scratching near the keyhole. I sat up quickly but didn't see anyone. I looked around at all the windows but still saw no one. Again, I shrugged it off as being tired and laid back down, turning up the radio. Despite the Texas heat and humidity, I was too tired to care. A few minutes later, I heard the door handle again and the car shook harder. I sat up quickly and saw a man standing at the passenger side looking in. Even though it was hot, he was wearing a red sweatshirt with the hood up, and I couldn't see his face. Being young, dumb, and just out of the military, I yelled, "What the fuck do you want?" He just stared at me. Like an idiot, I got out of the car. I'm only 5'6", but I was pissed. The man just walked off towards the picnic tables like nothing had happened. I yelled after him, threatening him if he came back. I decided to leave. I got back in the car and drove off, but only about 10 miles down the road, I felt tired again. Luckily, another 10 miles down I-35, I came across another picnic stop. Not sure why North Texas doesn't have proper rest areas, but they don't. I pulled into the second stop and backed into a spot, just in case I needed to leave quickly. There was only one other car there, and no semi-trucks. I locked the doors, cracked the windows, turned on my boombox again, and quickly fell asleep. About 30 minutes later, I heard a loud thud on my driver's side window. I jumped up and looked around, but no one was there. Stupidly, I got out of the car again, thinking my military attitude would protect me. But no one was around. I assumed it was just nerves from the previous stop. I got back into the car, locked the doors, and closed my eyes again, but I was too on edge to sleep. I laid there with my eyes closed, feeling like someone was watching me. I opened my eyes and saw the same man standing there again, wearing the red sweatshirt, hood up. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could tell he was smiling at me. I jumped up, tried to quickly open the door to bump him, but because the doors were locked, they wouldn't open. He walked backwards, still staring at me. By the time I got out, he was about 30 feet away, still facing me. It was fairly dark, but as I looked him over, I could tell he was skinny, but about 6'2" or 6'3". He was wearing the same red hooded sweatshirt, blue jeans, and green tennis shoes. For some reason, the shoes struck me as odd. I saw something shiny in his hand, which I believe was a machete. I quickly reached into my back seat, grabbed my baseball bat, and started yelling at him to come get some. He started walking towards me, and I took a few steps in his direction, not really thinking. I got about 5 feet from my car, and he was now about 15 feet away when a yellow van pulled up quickly and parked just off to the side of my car. That's when I realized what was really happening. I saw 2 other guys wearing hooded sweatshirts inside the van. Before they could get out, I ran back to my car. Luckily, I had left the keys in the ignition. Since I had backed in, I was able to peel out of there quickly. I was lucky I didn't stall the car, as the 2 other guys were already out of the van, and the first man was just about to reach my car. I sped back onto the interstate and didn't stop until I was about 20 miles into Oklahoma. I stopped for gas and to use the restroom. Inside the restroom, I noticed the same missing persons flyer I had barely glanced at earlier. It warned people not to stop for long periods at rest areas and described a suspect, a man about 6 feet tall, wearing blue jeans, green shoes, and a red hooded sweatshirt. I went pale. Needless to say, since it was daylight, I drove the rest of the way to Wisconsin wide awake. I never reported it to the number on the flyer or told anyone about it, but now I live in North Texas and pass those 2 picnic stops every day on my way to work. I think about it often. I wonder if they ever got anyone else or if they were caught. I tried looking it up, but I haven't found any stories about it online. It was February of 2014. A situation at work came to a head all at once, and I was going to have to spend the entire weekend writing a press release that was needed by Monday at 10 a.m. My grandparents owned some property way out in the boonies of East Texas. I grew up going out there all the time for family get-togethers and whatnot. Since it was only a 45-minute drive from where I lived, I would often go out there with friends to camp, party, or just hang out. Knowing I would be writing all weekend, I thought, why not spend it in the great outdoors instead of holed up in my apartment in Houston? I had never stayed out there by myself, but had always wanted to, so I thought this would be an excellent time to do it. I called my granddad, asking if it would be okay to use the place for the weekend, and he said of course. He did seem a little hesitant about me going alone, but I was a 24-year-old guy who had grown up hiking and felt totally competent to handle anything that might happen. Honestly, at the time, I was a little insulted that he seemed to think me going out there by myself wasn't the best idea. He made sure I knew how to turn on the electricity and water. We use a well for water and have a big switch that controls the electricity out there, which of course I did. I had done it a million times before when I brought friends. He also asked if I had a key, which I did. Finally, he said, "You know where I keep the Henry, right?" My granddad is kind of a cowboy and keeps a big Henry repeater out there mainly for shooting whitetail deer, but you never know. I said yes, though I was admittedly a little nervous since, to my knowledge, he was the only one who had ever stayed out there alone. He had never really talked to me about his guns before. The only shooting I had done out there was with a pellet gun as a kid and a camera as I got older. The drive out was nice once I got out of the city. I left work at 4:30, already packed, and drove straight there. With traffic, I made it out there by about 6:45 p.m. It was still light, but dusk was starting to set in. I took my duffel bag out of the trunk and went inside. The house is more like a small resort than a ranch house. It's really nice, which is why I love taking people out there. My granddad was pretty well off and had the place built when he retired. It has 12 bedrooms, and I chose the upstairs master bedroom, if you could call it that. I unpacked, sat on the bed, opened my laptop to look at what I had to write, and immediately closed it. Fuck that, I thought. I'll work on it tomorrow. Right now, I want to take a walk. There's a trail that goes in a big circle around the perimeter of the property, about 3.5 miles. It was dark by now, and the thought briefly crossed my mind to bring my granddad's gun, but I decided on a sturdy 5-foot wooden dowel instead. That way, I'd have a walking stick, and I wouldn't risk slipping in the dark and shooting my foot off. I put on a hoodie, grabbed a flashlight, and started off. It was a clear, moonless night, and the swath of the Milky Way across the sky was impressive, but it was still really dark. I didn't use my flashlight so my eyes would adjust, and after 10 or so minutes I could see reasonably well. It was nice. Chilly, but nice. After about 1.5 miles, I decided to cut the route short and head back through the woods. I know the land so well that I could easily find my way back to the house from any point on the property. The woods and brush were pretty dense, though, so I turned on the flashlight. A thick wall of twigs and vines appeared in front of me. I pushed through it with my stick, getting a couple of scratches, when I saw something deeper in the woods, partially obscured by the underbrush. It looked like someone had left a pile of clothes in the woods. I kept the light on it for a second or two, trying to figure out what it was. Suddenly, it jumped up really fast and sprinted further into the forest. My heart leapt into my throat and my stomach did a somersault. I felt the pins and needles of an adrenaline surge all over. With all the force I could muster, I tried to shout, "Who is that?" But I have no idea what it actually sounded like. Immediately, I regretted not having the rifle. Worse yet, I had left my cell phone on the bed. Fucking brilliant. The worst part was that whoever that guy was, he had taken off in the direction of the house and I couldn't remember if I had locked the door. As the initial shock wore off, the real fear set in. It was suddenly very cold. Never before had I felt so isolated and so stupid. I should have never come out here alone. If that guy shoots me or something, no one will even know I'm missing until Monday. Okay, get a hold of yourself. You need to get your phone. I walked a mile through the woods, absolutely terrified. The woods end about 150 yards from the house's front patio, and I basically sprinted the rest of the way. For anyone who's been in a situation like this, you know that running doesn't help. You feel that gut-wrenching panic thinking something is right on your heels. When I got to the front door, still in this semi-sane state, I got another shock. The door was cracked open, and I couldn't remember if I had left it that way or not. I had to go inside. I pushed the door open holding the dowel like a baseball bat, and immediately heard shrieking coming from the living room. I don't think I've ever been as close to blind terror as I was at that moment. I could barely speak. I sprinted up the stairs to the room where my stuff was, expecting to see some horrific rotted corpse shrieking at me at every turn. For some reason, that's exactly what I thought I would see. I slammed the door behind me and heard the scream again, this time from directly below me. I ran into the bathroom, dialed 911, locked the door, and hid in the shower. In retrospect, this seems like a really cowardly thing to do, but every ounce of bravado I had was long gone. I tried to explain what was happening to the dispatcher, but I'm not sure how much sense it made. There's a little town about 9 miles away from the property, and that's where the nearest police station was. It took them 20 minutes to arrive, during which I heard the scream one more time. It was lower pitched now, more strangled. Then, the godsend of flashing red and blue lights appeared through the window. I was still in the shower when I heard a man shout, "Police! Anyone here? Come out!" I got up, opened the bathroom door, and heard a voice downstairs say, "Christ, Evans, call an ambulance." I opened the bedroom door and saw a cop down the hall with a gun on me saying, "Freeze!" I tried to explain that this was my family's place and I was the caller, but they still handcuffed me. I soon saw why. In the living room lay the man I had seen in the woods on his back, staring blankly upward. One arm was outstretched toward the ceiling, and the other was bent but still reaching upward. His head was lying in a pool of blood. We eventually cleared up who was who, and they realized I hadn't cracked the guy over the head. Later I found out that this man was a paranoid schizophrenic, probably homeless, who had wandered onto our property. It's hard to tell where he came from. We still don't know why he was bleeding. Likely blunt force trauma of some sort, maybe a fall. This happened about a month ago at my job. I work at a beauty supply store in South Texas. I was doing a typical evening shift with my coworker. It was just the two of us working, when this guy, who looked to be in his mid-20s, came in and lurked around the front of the store, pacing back and forth. He immediately gave me creepy vibes. My coworker, Ellen, asked him if he needed any help, and he said, "No, just waiting on my mom." Now his mom wasn't even in the store. She was standing outside smoking and taking a long time. I thought this was odd, so I immediately tried my best to ignore him and kept my head down, pretending to look at paperwork. He asked if we had a restroom he could use, which we found strange because, right next door, there was a huge, well-known grocery store with restrooms. Our store has a back room where we keep stock, and you have to go through it to reach our little bathroom. Already sketched out, Ellen told him, "I think our managers are having a meeting back there. Let me go check if it's okay," which was a total lie because it was just the two of us working. She went to the back to check, leaving me alone with the creepy guy. Trying my best to ignore him, which didn't work, he tried to strike up a conversation. He asked if he might know me from somewhere because I look familiar. I said, "No, I don't think so," and he asked if I went to a certain high school. He named it. I said no, even though I did, but only for a year. He then asked if I went to another high school, and I said no. He apologized and said he thought he knew me. Finally, my coworker came back from checking and told him, "No, our managers are having a meeting." The whole time, his mom was still outside smoking. He occasionally went outside to talk to her, then came back in. At this point, both Ellen and I were definitely freaked out. A couple of customers came in and out, and while Ellen was checking out one of them at the register, the creepy guy came up and said to her, "I really like your nails. Did you do them yourself?" Ellen said, "No, I got them done at a salon," all while checking out a customer. Completely freaked out, I continued trying to ignore him. He eventually left, saying he would be back in about 10 minutes with his mom. I dreaded it because this guy had creep written all over him. About 15 minutes later, his mom came in without him. I thought, okay, maybe he decided not to come back. She started asking questions about hair dye and what she was thinking about doing with her hair. Ellen and I helped her out, but much to my dismay, here came the creepy dude waltzing back into the store. Now it was just me, Ellen, the mom, and the creepy dude. While the mom chatted with Ellen, the creepy dude stood behind his mom but faced me. I pretended to listen to the mom, avoiding eye contact with him. As much as I wished I hadn't, I looked at him, and he was just staring at me. Alarms went off in my head, and my heart started racing. Something didn't feel right. He then walked around the aisle and back up the opposite end, so now he was standing directly behind me. My heart was racing even more, and I stood as close to Ellen as I could, practically shoulder to shoulder, while she and the mom talked. The creepy guy started moving closer to me and tried to start a conversation. I gave him an annoyed look, as I was trying to listen to his mom, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." He moved further away but kept pacing back and forth, acting like he was bored. Ellen then bumped my shoulder, motioned her head toward the creepy dude behind me, and whispered for me to check something at the register. I knew something was up and that he was doing something behind my back. As much as I didn't want to leave Ellen's side, because I knew he'd try to start another conversation with me, I went to the register and stood near the front of the store, waiting for them to finish up. The mom kept chatting about hair dye for another 5 minutes while the creepy dude continued pacing and pretending to look at merchandise. Finally, they came up front. The mom kept asking questions and finding new topics to discuss. At this point, the whole situation felt even shadier and just plain annoying. I occasionally glanced up and the creepy dude was still staring at me. I put on my resting bee face and stayed quiet. The mom continued babbling for another 10 minutes, then said she couldn't buy anything until the 3rd because that's when she gets paid. She told us she'd be back on the 3rd, and they finally left. I watched as they got into their car and sat there for a good 15 minutes before finally driving off. Ellen then told me that the creepy dude had been taking pictures of everything in the store, and she saw him take pictures of me while he was standing behind me. That's why she made me go up front to check something. I may be overreacting, but the whole thing didn't feel right. I texted my mom and told her everything, asking her to park as close as possible when she picked me up just in case they came back and were waiting for us to close. My mom thinks maybe the creepy dude was staking the place out to either rob us or kidnap us after we closed. Anyway, it's been about a month, and I have yet to see them since. Who knows if that guy and the mom were really mom and son.